Oh my gosh.
All right. We should be on this page. We're going to get into quadratics a little bit more today and probably tomorrow too. But we're going to be looking at the quadratic form and a couple of different things that we can do with that. We spent a lot of time, especially last year in Algebra 2, talking about the quadratic. Most of like quarter 1 and even into quarter 2 last year, so probably like about 2.5 months, we probably spent a ton of time going over factoring, the quadratic formula, completing the square. There was a lot of stuff that we could do with the quadratic. And so we're going to kind of take everything that we talked about last year in like those 2.5 months, and we're going to condense it down into 2 days. So we're going to kind of take all those things that you guys did and just kind of review and refresh them. So we're going to be talking about factoring again, which some of that we've already done. So hopefully that's pretty easy. We'll talk about the square root property. We'll get into completing the square. We will talk about the quadratic formula. We'll see if any of you remember the song for that. And then we'll talk also about the discriminant. And then we'll get into some application problems as well. So we've spent a little bit of time already this year kind of reviewing how to factor things, and we did talk a little bit about solving them. So that would be after you factored, you would set your pieces equal to 0, and you would solve for x, and that would give you the solutions, or maybe they'd say the roots, the zeros, your answers to your problem. And so we're going to do a little bit of that again to get started. Now, what you want to make sure before you begin to factor is that the equation is set equal to 0. So if you need to move terms to the other side of the equal sign, you're going to want to do that. Then we'll factor, and then we're going to set everything equal to 0 so that we can figure out what our true solutions would be. So if we look at this first one, it says 2x squared plus x equals 1. I want to get it to equal 0 first. So I need to move that 1 over to the other side. So I'm going to do that by subtracting 1. So I'm going to rewrite this equation. So it says 2x squared plus x minus 1, and now it says equal 0. How are we going to have to factor this kind of problem? Can we do the shortcut method for this one?
No.
Why not?
There is something else besides a 1 in front of it. So,
In front of the x squared?
Yeah.
Yeah, in front of that quadratic term, it's not just x squared, it's 2x squared. So we're going to have to do this the little bit longer method. So we're going to start by taking our a times our c. Remember, 2 would be your a, the number in front of x would be your b, and the last number would be your c. So we're going to start by taking 2 times -1, which would be -2. And we're going to add to the middle number, which is just a 1, because that's what's in front of the x. So what two numbers are going to multiply to a -2 but add to a +1? 2 and -1. Okay, do you guys remember what you have to do next?
X plus 2.
Not quite. We can't go straight there because we can't just go straight to the shortcut. But we do have to do something with those numbers, 2 and -1.
You go 2x plus 2.
So you want 2x squared plus...
Oh, yeah, 2x squared plus 2. Or does it matter which one?
It doesn't matter which one you put first.
And then minus 1x.
Can I just write minus x?
Yeah. And then minus 1.
Minus 1, good. You have to rewrite the middle term, that x, using the factors that you found from your chart. So now when we get this, it has 4 terms to it, because then you're going to have to group. So you're going to group the first 2 together, and you're going to group the second 2 terms together. And then you start to look for greatest common factors. What can you take out of both sets? So what can we take out of those first 2 terms? 2x. And if we take a 2x out, what are we left with?
X plus 1.
Okay, what about the second set? We take out a -1 so that we're left with
X plus 1.
How do you guys know you're doing it right so far? Yes, the things in the parentheses match. Okay, so now we're going to set this equal to 0 still. How do I write the final factors here? Good. You take those things that are sitting up front, you put those together, and then the one that repeats, you just drop it down one time. Okay, but now since we are talking about solving quadratics, we do want to make sure we set these equal to 0. We talked about this when we factored. We did do that in our notes, but then when you guys were doing it on your homework, I didn't really emphasize solving them. Now I'm going to. So now you just have to make sure you set them both equal to 0. So you're going to set 2x minus 1 equal to 0 and x plus 1 equal to 0. You might even be able to do that part mentally. What do you get for x's? 1/2 and -1. Good. Those are your final answers. Okay, if you guys look at the second one, what do you need to do first? So I'm going to write minus 5x on both sides here. Now, I would just caution you to be careful when you rewrite this one. Make sure you put it in the correct order. What does it need to say?
3x squared minus 5x.
Good. Very good. Keep in mind that descending order, you want it to be x squared, x, and then your number. That way, when you go to start factoring it now, you've got all the numbers in the right spot, because you're going to have to probably use the method that we just talked about. You're going to have to do that grouping again. I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to go ahead and try to finish this one up on your own. Okay, I've got it kind of started up here. So the first thing I did is I had to multiply 3 times -2. And that got me that -6. So I'm trying to multiply to a -6, but still add to that -5 that's in front of the x. My numbers at work there are a -6 and a 1. So then you can see I rewrote it using the -6 and 1 to replace that -5x. Now I'm going to group. And I took a 3x out of the first set. And that leaves me with x minus 2. And then I really don't need to take anything out of the second one. But if you wanted to, maybe just put a +1 in front of that so that you remind yourself. You still have to think about that being a placeholder. It's not a 0, So you're not going to pull a 0 out when you go to write out your factors. So your factors should have looked like this: 3x plus 1 and x minus 2. Did everyone get there okay? And then when you set those both equal to 0, what'd you guys get for answers? Negative 1 over 3 and 2. Good. Very good. Questions on factoring? Feel okay about that? Okay, if you guys turn the page over. So this next situation is we're going to use something called the square root property, because sometimes you'll have a quadratic, but it's missing the linear term. It's missing the x from the equation. So you'll have the quadratic term, the x squared, and you'll have a constant, like the number, but that linear piece that's in the middle isn't there. And so we could still factor this. We could do what we were just doing on the last one. But if we use the square root property, it's actually going to be a little bit faster instead of having to do the factoring. So when we see something written like this, I basically want to almost undo what I just told you guys to do on the last one. The last one we were factoring, I said, you want to make sure it's set equal to 0. In this case, because I'm missing that linear term, I just want to get the x squared by itself. So I want to move everything away from the x squared here. So the first thing I would do is move that 45. Now it's negative right now, so I'm going to add 45 over to both sides of the equation here. And this is going to be rewritten as 5x squared equals 45. Then what do you think I should do? I want to do that, but not yet. I would divide by 5 first. It's probably going to make the square rooting a little bit easier, because now if I divide out that 5, I have x squared equals a 9. And now I would be all on board for square rooting. Because you got that x squared term by itself, it's isolated now, we can go ahead and square root. And what is the square root of 9? Now, what is it technically? It's 3, but what technically is in front? Plus or minus? Make sure you have the plus or minus there, because we are thinking about roots here, the zeros. And since it's squared, there should probably be a positive and a negative when we're getting to that square root. Okay? What would you guys do on that next one? Okay, add the 24. Now what? And then what happens when you square root this one? It can't be like a perfect square, okay? But can we break it down? How'd you get there? Put it in your calculator. Your calculators can do them for you if they're in the right mode. If they're not in the right mode, you might have to, if you don't know how to change it to the right mode, you'll have to probably know that you got to break this 12 down to a 4 times 3. And those are still both underneath the square root signs like that. But because right now I'm not really testing your ability on being able to reduce radicals, like you've already had to do that. You've already had to learn the process of like breaking those down individually. The calculators can do them for you if they're in like the math type mode. So if you have it set to that and you type in the square root of 12, it will pop this out for you. It'll say 2 square root of 3. Make sure though that you put that plus or minus in front. Okay, so I'm fine if you guys want to do that, only because I'm not testing you on that ability right now. Just like it's okay if when you're trying to graph something, you want to use the table function on your calculator to give you points. It's okay to do those kind of things because we've already had to learn how to do all of that the long-handed way. Do you have any questions on how to do those types of problems there? Okay, so that kind of goes like hand in hand. They were both kind of similar to factoring with each other there. We're going to kind of switch gears now, and we're going to talk about something called completing the square. Now, completing the square is another process that could be used to help you solve a quadratic. And so we have multiple ways to solve quadratics because sometimes it's easier to factor. Sometimes it's easier to use the completing the square. Sometimes it's easier to use quadratic formula. It just kind of depends on what they're presenting you with. So if we think back to that example that we did on like the previous page, maybe we could have tried to use completing the square for that. I'm not saying that it maybe would have worked out for our benefit. It might have still caused us a little bit of a headache here, but there are certain situations where completing the square is easier than factoring. How completing the square works is you're going to take the constant term, you're going to move it over to the other side of the equal sign. So again, like the last ones, I don't want them to say equal 0. I want to have a constant term on the other side of the equal sign. And then you're going to look at the middle term, and you're going to do this process that looks like right here. You're going to take that number that's in front of the x, so that's our b term. You're going to divide it by 2, and you're going to square it. And then that's going to get added on to both sides of the equal sign. So you're going to put it on to the left side with the quadratic and the linear term, and you're going to put it on the right side with that constant that we moved over. The reason why we do that is because then we're going to be able to see that this left side factors really easily by using some of those shortcuts that we talked about when we factored. Let me show you what I mean. If you had an equation that said x squared plus 6x, okay, if you were going to do the completing the square process, so let's just say it says 0 over here, like there was no constant term, you would take 6 divided by 2. What is 6 divided by 2? 3. And you would square it. So what's 3 squared? 9. So 9 would go here, and it would go over here. Because then the left-hand side will factor to x plus that 3 that we found when we took 6 divided by 2 squared. And then it would equal 9. And then we're going to be able to use our square root property like we just learned to finish this one out. Again, you learned this last year, so it might be a little fuzzy right now, but maybe as we do one together, you'll kind of feel like, oh yeah, I remember doing this now. So if we look at this first one where it says 3x squared plus 4x minus 1, I want to move that 1 over to the other side. I don't want it to say equal 0. I want to move this 1. Okay, and when I do that, guys, and I rewrite this, I write it out as 3x squared plus 4x plus I draw a blank, and now it equals 1, and then I draw another blank. Okay, now before you jump into doing half of your b term, one little caveat that we haven't talked about yet. The number in front of the x squared, in order for this to work, cannot be anything but a 1. So what number is in front of my x squared right now? A 3. Because there's a 3, I need to get rid of that. So I need to divide all the terms here by 3. Now, it's not going to be super pretty for some of these numbers, because if I take 4 divided by 3 and 1 divided by 3, I'm going to get fractions. So I'm going to divide all of this. I'm just going to write, I'm dividing all of it by a 3. And so it's going to say x squared plus 4/3 x. And then I'm still just going to leave my blanks in the problem. Equals 1/3 plus another blank here. It looks ugly right now, but I promise filling in the blanks is really not going to be super difficult because of like the process that we're going to go into next. So the next thing you're going to do, I'm going to write this over here. This is like the actual completing the square process. Step 1 is I'm going to take half of my b term. So I'm going to take half of the 4/3. You're taking a half times 4/3 there. What does that become? And maybe reduce before you multiply. What would that become? What's a half times 4/3? Use your calculator if you need to. 2/3? Okay, Step 2 is to square that. So you're going to take 2/3 squared. And what do you get? 4/9. Okay. I'm going to fill that in on my blanks over here. So 4/9 goes on both sides. To factor the left-hand side, I want you to draw sets of parentheses and put a square on the outside. The x is just going to come down because if I were to split that x squared, each set of my parentheses would get an x. And I only have one set because it's going to be the same quantity twice. Where we get the number from is this number from step 1. It's always going to be that number. So it's going to be x plus, in this case, 2/3 squared. Now over here, I do need you guys to add 1/3 plus 4/9. But again, if you have a calculator in front of you, use it. They can do all that fraction stuff for you, so you don't really have to think too hard about it. So what is 1/3 plus 4/9? 16/9. Again, I know it looks kind of ugly right now, but the next step would be to get rid of that squared. And I'm already looking at that 16 and 9, and I'm glad that those are the numbers that we have because those are easy to square root. So I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. So on the left, remember in the past when we saw quantities that were squared and they're underneath the square root sign, they're going to cancel each other off. So that x plus 2/3 comes down. And then over here, it's going to be plus or minus what? 4/3. Okay, we are almost done. We need to subtract 2/3 over to get x by itself. But remember over there on the right side, it's a positive 4/3 and it's a negative 4/3. So you have to think about it both ways. You have to think about 4/3 like the positive side minus 2/3 and negative 4/3 minus 2/3. So we have to make sure that we have both answers. So what's 4/3 minus 2/3? Just positive 2, I think, because 4 minus 2 is 2. So 2/3, there's one answer. And then over here, what would be negative 4/3 minus 2/3?
-2.
Oh, careful.
Pause it. 6.
Negative 6.
Okay.
Because it's negative 4 minus 2. The denominators are already like, so you're not going to do anything with the 3. But negative 4 minus 2 more is negative 6. But what is negative 6 divided by 3? Negative 2. Okay, let's do one more with the completing the square. This one is not going to be as messy as that last one because do we have a 1 in front of our x squared here? Yes, thank goodness. Okay. Well, anytime I'm doing completing the square, if there's a number, honestly, on that last one, I probably would not have chosen completing the square to try to do that one. I would have maybe chose a different method just because of that number being a 3. In this case, because it's x squared, this looks a lot nicer to me when it comes to completing the square. I'm not going to have to worry about dividing everything by anything here because it's kind of already set up for me. But I do need to move that 2 over to the other side. So I'm going to start by subtracting the 2. And I'm going to rewrite this, and I'm going to include those blanks. So now it says x squared plus 6x plus, we got to fill in something there, equals negative 2 plus, we got to fill it in. All right, so let's do the process. I'm going to write that over here again. Step 1, half of your b. What's our b term? 6. What's half of 6? Okay, I'm going to circle that number. We want to come back to that. Step 2, is we take 3 and we square it. 3 squared is 9. That's going to be your number that goes in the blanks. Okay? The reason why I circled that 3 is because I want you to use it on this next step. How does this factor on the left side? Good. X plus 3. And then over here, what do we have? 7. Now what? Square root. Yep. Good. X plus 3 equals. Can I square root 7? No. It also isn't going to simplify to anything. If you type it in your calculator is just going to say square root of 7. So plus or minus square root of 7. What's the last thing I need to do here to get x by itself? Minus 3. Can you combine the negative 3 and the square root of 7? No. So we have to keep them separated. Which one do you think I would write first? The 3. I would write negative 3 first and then plus or minus square root of 7. Questions on completing the square? Okay. That's where we're going to stop for today.